Hello there, this is Craig Hayner, Dr. Dell. This video is going to be really after you've been through the TI-30Xa program, and even really after you've been through the practical math program that follows up on that, about what does the future hold for math education for you, maybe your children, other children, the future. And it's pretty incredible what it's going to be in the 21st century. It's going to be a lot different than it was in the 20th century, in my judgment, for reasons that I'm going to explain to you. Now, the facts of the matter are, we've developed at Triad Math Inc., our corporate company, over the last decade, a comprehensive high school level math program that actually goes beyond most high school math programs. It goes well beyond them, as a matter of fact, way beyond them. In fact, it's hard to even compare them, to be honest about it. And it's because of technology. I mean, today, for example, it's very hard to compare a landline phone, our old technology, to a smartphone. It's way beyond a phone even. It goes way beyond being a phone. We still call it a smartphone, but it really is a computer that does all sorts of things beyond being a phone, as you know. Everybody knows that. So what's going to happen is, the first thing you're going to do is you're going to go into what we call Tier 3, which is preparing students that are going to go to college to do well on the SAT and the ACT tests. Now, in my judgment, those are not very good tests. I don't think much of them. I have a low opinion of them for reasons I explain in a book that I will give to you for free called Golden Rule Math for All God's Children. Also, another book, even better than that, called Public School Math is Destroying the USA, but talk about it in a moment. Tier 3. Now, this will get a student ready for those tests. At that point in time, for the first time ever, I actually use a high school math textbook by the greatest teacher of the 20th century, Dr. George Simmons. And I explain that in depth other places, so I won't do it on this video. But this is about a $20 book today. Thank God it's still available on Amazon. It's not out of print. I don't know of any school that's ever used it, but it's better than all the other high school math books I've ever seen combined. 119 pages. Very few students know all of the geometry and algebra and trigonometry that's in this book. And I start using it in Tier 3. I use just part of it in Tier 3. Now, you can be ready to do well on the SAT and ACT and get a good score on them. Are you ready now today for STEM, science and engineering courses at a really good school? And the answer is no, not even remotely ready. Tier 4 is where I teach now pre-calculus. I'm going about algebra, analytical geometry, complex numbers, trigonometry, all at a much deeper level. This, by the way, this book, 500 pages on Amazon, sells for about $17 or $18. It's 500 pages. Tier 4, I call it. And I'll tell you a little more about it in a moment. We'll look at the syllabus of it briefly. There's no school in the country, there's no textbook that does what this book does, or that even comes close to my knowledge. I wish there were. By the way, it's not a textbook. This is notes and exercises that go with the tutorial videos, like all my other programs do. Then what are you ready for? You're ready for calculus. Now, there's two kinds. There's differential and integral. Very few schools go beyond differential calculus because that's kind of doable manually. But the manual tools are very difficult for integral calculus. But I teach both of them in this Tier 5 book, differential and integral calculus, because of a modern tool I'm going to tell you about in a minute that changes everything in the math education world today. And in fact, if you know math, if you know anyone that's a scientist or an engineer, you can ask them. The workhorse of science and engineering models are what are called differential equations. And I cover that in Tier 6. Not a very thick book because of a modern tool. Now, differential equations is usually not taught until about the sophomore year of college. And now we're doing it in high school. I have students as young as 16 and 17 have gone through calculus and differential equations because of the modern tools. Now, this is hard to believe. I explain this in quite a bit of depth in a book you can buy on Amazon for $29 called Golden Rule Math for All God's Children. Really aimed at homeschoolers more than anything. It's aimed at anybody, though, that wants to know about modern math education. This book explains it pretty well. Well, recently I wrote another book that it's kind of designed to be controversial because I want you really to think about it. It's called Public School Math is Destroying the USA. Now, what I mean by destroying is destroying what its potential could be, what it could be, what it should be. And the reason is public school math is still bogged down in the old 20th century programs that were developed really over the last 100 years, all up through the 20th century. And they're loaded with two things that shouldn't be in them. One is manual tools that are obsolete and very difficult to learn and use, and really discourage students tremendously, cause a lot of students just to flunk out and give up. And often theoretical concepts that are really inappropriate at this level. Only theoretical mathematicians care about them. And I give examples of that in other places that's easy to see. So that's what my program consists of. I believe it's a program that's for the 21st century, and I know of no other program that even comes close to doing what it does. Now, let me share the screen with you. And we're going to go to my personal website, craighane.com. Now, I invite you or urge you to go look at my vita. Who am I? Who am I to make these claims? Am I some crazy guy, some lunatic, whatever? Well, the truth is I have a PhD in theoretical mathematics that I got from Indiana University many years ago. And I was a math professor after I got the PhD for 7 years. 3 years at Indiana State University in Terre Haute, Indiana, which is essentially a teacher's college. They teach future high school teachers. And then 4 years at an engineering school in Terre Haute called Rolls-Hulman Institute of Technology, where I was teaching. In both of those schools, by the way, I was teaching advanced theoretical math you need for quantum theory and theoretical physics and things like that. Topology, functional analysis, complex numbers, all that kind of thing, way beyond high school. But my love was always been for high school math. I taught high school math a few years before I got my PhD. I was teaching high school level math for many years as a tutor, and I actually taught it full time for 1 year in Ohio, Western Reserve High School. And I wanted to improve math education, but it was very difficult to do, and there really wasn't much I could do about it. We didn't have the technologies to do it. And if you wrote a better textbook that was radically different, no one would adopt it. So I gave up. I didn't even try, really. I just didn't see any way to do it. Then along came technology. The internet came along. It wasn't enough, but it began to make things doable. And I began to work on that. And I want to show you on my website, I've also got my story. And that story, by the way, I cover pretty extensively in this book, Public School Math book, because I want you to know how it all came about. How did I come up with this new way of teaching math, the 21st century method? What was it that caused it to happen for me? Well, the truth is, had I stayed as a high school teacher, or if I'd stayed in education, that wouldn't have happened. I got outside of it, and that's what allowed it. And I explain all that in this book. And now the 4 chapters in this book that really explain why current public school math is a great failure are chapters 19, 20, 21, and 22. Those 4 chapters. That's the meat of the book. And then the rest of it is sort of getting you ready to fully understand that if you can. This book is written for laymen, but of course, if you know mathematics, or if you're a STEM professional, you'll really understand it a lot better. Now, at my website, I have a video library with lots of free videos in it, all about all kinds of different things in math that you might enjoy. And you'll get to know me better. And you can watch some of those videos and get to know me. Now, our parent company is Triad Math Inc., and that's our corporate company. And well, here was a Golden Rule Math, but you go to goldenrulemath.com and get a free copy of that book, get a free PDF copy. But here's my corporate site, Triad Math Inc. We're about a 10-year-old company, and our whole idea is to do what I'm telling you about, a 21st century approach to math, which is incredibly different. This would be like comparing a Tesla automobile to a horse and buggy, frankly. 20th century math, the way it's taught, even today, so they haven't transcended it, is like horse and buggy math with a lot of irrelevant theory tossed in. Not awful. I mean, it's hard to believe, but it's true. So you're back to my website, Triad Math. I have something called the supercomputer you'll definitely want to look into. And anybody that's going beyond, is going into STEM math is going to want to get one. And it's an incredible thing. And I'll tell you a little more about it in a moment. I have a thing on workforce math, which is getting people ready for the workforce. And that's completely different than getting ready for college. In fact, tiers 1 and 2 get you ready for the workforce. That's what I've been teaching so far with the calculator and the practical math. Tier 3 is getting you ready to SAT and the ACT, stuff you got to learn for that. And there's some practical stuff in it too, but mostly that. Now, when I get into the upper tiers, then that's when things really change. So download the PDF for the 6th tier. This is particularly true now if you are a, this will be on the supercomputer, by the way, an incredible thing. And I got something called the STEM Math Challenge, and you'll want to learn all about it. If you're in science engineering, you want to learn about the supercomputer. I won't get into it more now. But when you get into the upper tiers, which I've been selling for years now, I'm giving away tier 1 now, as you know. You probably got it for free. When we're selling the upper tiers in for an extra $100 for each tier, you get tier 2 now for $97, and then on. Now tiers 1 through 3, 1 through 4, 1 through 5, and then 1 through 6. These are the upper tiers. And I have students now that have actually gone through up through tier 6. And it's an incredible story. And by the way, I have what I call the Uncle Jack elementary math videos, which is to help parents teach their kids elementary math the way my Uncle Jack taught me, but that's another story. Now you get to the syllabus, and if you should be, if you're watching this video, you're probably through tier practical math, tier 2. Tier 3 is getting you ready, and I use the Simmons book now, a little bit of it. I use about, I don't know, 20% of it maybe, because it's a good textbook, and it's getting you ready for the SAT and the ACT. And so I use a lot of custom notes too, because there's a lot of stuff's not in the Simmons book. Sample tests, getting you ready, the psychology of it and all that. Now, let's say you take the SAT and you get a perfect score on. Are you ready for science and engineering at a good school? No, not even close. Now, tier 4 is where we really get into it. Now, in tier 4, I go through this book completely in depth, but I do much more than that, because this book was written in 1988, and there's a lot of technologies come out about since then that, of course, he didn't know about, and so I began to use that. So I do a little bit in the beginning, a little deeper in algebra, in geometry, which is really interesting. But now in algebra, you'll notice something. This is really important. In A5, I put a star by it. I introduce you to the tool called Wolfram Alpha. Now that is a 21st century tool. It was introduced to the world in 2009 by Stephen Wolfram. And it's a miracle tool. It does things for advanced mathematics, for STEM math, that there's nothing else like it that I know of. And it makes STEM math 100 times easier to learn and to apply. STEM math used to be a barrier for people to go into science and engineering and even into medicine. I've talked to a lot of medical doctors, and they almost didn't make it through integral calculus. Integral calculus is the big barrier in STEM math, because it's on a scale of 1 to 10, it's about an 8 difficulty with manual techniques. The modern Wolfram Alpha reduces it down to a difficulty level of 2. Now, I start using Wolfram Alpha now from this point forward, even using Simmons' book. I'm using Wolfram Alpha, and it's incredible what it does. I learned math better developing this program than I'd ever knew it manually, and I've taught most of this stuff probably 20 times manually, because this was the old manual way, the only way you could do it. Wolfram Alpha, like I said, it's like all of a sudden, it's like a Tesla automobile. And what I had to teach, and they're still teaching it, is horse and buggy math. Think of that, horse and buggy math, Tesla automobile. Which are you going to use today? What are you going to do? If you want to go anywhere of any significance, if you say horse and buggy, quit watching this video, go away, good luck to you, have a great life. The Amish are great people. I love the Amish, but I wouldn't want to live their life. I like the modern world we live in. I love the modern world. Now, tier 3, as I already mentioned, was just getting ready for the SAT. Now, in tier 4, I do algebra using Wolfram Alpha, trigonometry now at a much deeper level. Trigonometry, by the way, is an incredibly important subject. Trig functions are, but to understand them in depth now, it's the basis of modern science, Fourier analysis, Fourier series, all the things you could do with trig. And now, and by the way, it used to be extremely difficult to understand it manually. Wolfram Alpha makes it very easy to understand. It's amazing. I've never seen a course yet that taught complex numbers properly. Complex numbers are critical in science and engineering. You can't do science and engineering without them. Electrical engineering, quantum theory, there's all sorts of places you got to have them. They need to be taught properly. And in fact, there's a certain equation, C8, I call it the wonderful equation. Well, C7, I call it the wonderful equation, then I give the motivation for it. It was discovered by Euler back in the 1700s, and Richard Feynman called it the most important equation in mathematics because it's what lets you understand complex numbers. It's called Euler's equation. And it's a phenomenal thing. And that's what I teach in tier 4. I didn't learn this till I was in like a senior in college before I learned this. No high school ever taught this. And even today, my guess would be if you go to most schools, I doubt if they teach it this way, but the way it should be taught, for probably your college, sophomore or junior year. I don't know. A lot of special topics in both algebra and geometry that you might find interesting. Now, tier 5, I mentioned, is calculus. Now, there's two kinds. There's differential calculus, which is how you take functions and you find their maximum, their minimum, their points of inflection, their concavity, and that sort of thing, where the increasing and decreasing. That's not too hard manually. When I taught at engineering school, most of our students could pass Calculus 1, differential calculus. And these rules are pretty easy to apply. They're time consuming and difficult, but they're not too hard. Kids could get through it. But now today with Wolfram Alpha, it's just a zip. But here's the deal. Integral calculus. This is the most important thing. You've got to know integral calculus. This is how you take a function. You want to know the area under the curve or the volume of a solid revolution or the arc length of a curve. That's called integral calculus. With the old manual techniques, that was a difficult subject. It flunked more students out of engineering school than any other subject. Like a filter subject. If you could get through that, you could survive. Just talk to a medical doctor that had to take this when they were in pre-med school and ask them what they thought about it. In fact, ask anybody. When I studied integral calculus, I struggled with it too. It was a son of a gun. I made it through and went on. Wolfram Alpha, it goes from a difficulty at 8 to a difficulty at 2. It's like this was a math barrier. Integral calculus, Wolfram Alpha is like a tunnel through the barrier. Just makes it easy. Now, integral calculus is very important. That's how you study functions and their behavior. Or where do they come from? Well, you got the classical functions that you learn about in trigonometry and things of that nature. But there's a lot more to that. So where they come from, they're solutions to what are called differential equations. When you set up a math model for Newton's physics, as basic as that, you have a differential equation and you have to solve it. And the solution is a function. Then you analyze the function with calculus. Well, how do you solve differential equations? Well, that's even harder than integral calculus. In fact, integral calculus, you're really solving the simplest of all differential equations. That's hard. This becomes even harder. Manually, this is a nightmare course, manually. Just ask any scientist or engineer you know about what they think of differential equations. Most of them say, well, we let the mathematicians solve them. We come up with them and the mathematicians solve them and give us the function, the answers, and then we analyze. Then we use the function. Well, Wolfram Alpha does it. You give it a differential equation, bing, bang, it solves it. It gives you the function. Even when it's the so-called special function, and most of them, the solutions are special functions. And when there's not a special function, and sometimes there's not, it shows you then the numerical function. So you see what it looks like graphically, how it behaves. Wolfram Alpha is amazing. That's why I can do this in these 6 tiers. Now, my position today is this, and this is what I explain in this public school math book. and in the Golden Rule Book. If you have a student interested in science and engineering, even potentially, when they're young, 12, 13 years old, get them started in my program. And if they, I'll tell you what, if they can't learn it in my program, they're probably never going to learn it anyway. Most students can. You don't need to be a genius to do this. You just need to be reasonably capable at math and a hard worker, willing to put the work in. It's not even too much work now. And what will happen is if they start when they're 12 years old, time they're 16 or 17, they'll be all the way through differential equations. I got a student recently named James, and he wants to go to the Air Force Academy. He's 17 years old. He's in differential equations. He went to the Air Force Academy for an interview. Oh my golly. Guess what? The Air Force Academy is using Wolfram Alpha. That was news to me. It's not in textbooks that I know of anywhere, but they're obviously the teachers know it and can use it. And he sat in on a junior level class. He's 17 years old. He was just there for an interview and he understood it. And they go, oh my golly, you understood it. You know, well, this is an advanced class. This is a junior level class. Then you're a 17-year-old high school student and you understood it. Yes, he did. This, if you're going to go to a top rate school, Purdue University, I'm a Hoosier. Purdue's a great school. I'm partial to it. But Illinois, MIT, Caltech, Carnegie Mellon, you name it. There's lots and lots of good schools around and many good schools. Any good school, you're going to go to it. Now, there's one in Texas, by the way, that's just starting called University Austin, Texas, UATX, brand new university, wanting to really do things in a much better and more efficient way. Dr. David Ruth is in charge of their STEM program. I'm working with Dr. Ruth to talk about this because he knows that this is the way you should teach math for STEM students. This is what they're going to do. Maybe not my program exactly, but something like it for sure. And he's told me he's taught for 13 years at the Naval Academy, and he said they're using Wolfram Alpha at the Naval Academy. How about that? And I know they're using it at the Air Force Academy. So schools are going to start using Wolfram Alpha. It's not in the textbooks yet. Not that I've seen. And there's more to it than just that. There's other things that are not in the textbooks that ought to be. Infinitesimals, for example. That's a long story I tell in my book. It's a nightmarish story that it's hard to believe that what happened, math educationally speaking, because of infinitesimals and how that was abused for over a century and still is today. That's another story. So this is Craig Hayne. As you can see, I'm enthused about this. I'm an old guy, been around a long time. I've taught lots and lots of students. Most of my students is practical math because they're going to go out and do practical things in technical subjects. But I've also taught some people going into science and advanced, and this is what they need, and it's just so exciting for them. So that's what I wanted to tell you. That's the future. That's the future. And go to my website, craighayne.com, look at these tiers and show them to somebody you know that is a really good scientist or a really good engineer, and they'll tell you, oh yeah, this is what you need to know. Oh, I wish I'd known that. I can't tell you the number of older people I've talked to, and they go, oh my God, I wish someone had taught me that. Oh my God, well, that's how I feel. I mean, I wish to God that this had been around when I did it, but you know, I didn't have to go on a horse and buggy, but I'll tell you what, I had to go on automobiles before they had automatic transmission. I'm that old, and they didn't have air conditioning, and they didn't have automatic windows. You had to roll them down manually, and in the summertime, you roll them down and got as cool as you could. No air conditioning, manual transmission, and now you got a modern car. And think what they do. It's just amazing. And like I said, to me, and by the way, FYI, Wolfram Alpha goes way beyond the differential equations. Once you get into Wolfram Alpha, you go to the supercomputer. I told you about that earlier. It's got something on it that's only 2 years called Wolfram language. And oh my golly, that's a programming language that lets you do things that you can't even dream of doing with ordinary programming languages. And that's on the supercomputer, as our Wolfram Alpha and Mathematica on it. That's why that's such an important computer you need to look at. Any of my students, by the way, time they get to tier 4, I make sure they get a supercomputer because it makes learning calculus and using Wolfram Alpha and all of that so much easier. You really need the supercomputer to do that. And I explain that other places, so I won't, this has been a long video now. but I'm excited. The future is so bright. We can, if we start teaching our students math the right way, we teach most of our students the first two tiers, practical math. That benefits, they're going to open up all kinds of job opportunities, military, industrial arts, and all that. A much smaller group of our students are going to go into science and engineering. But for those students, this modern technology is going to let a lot more do it, and it's going to make it a lot easier for them, and they're going to go a lot faster and a lot deeper. Believe me, it's just an incredible world we live in. I'm so excited about it. I have 3 children, and they've been extremely successful. I was able to teach them some math that wasn't available in the schools back then. And believe me, I don't want to brag too much, but it helped all 3 of them a lot. And I have other students that weren't my own children that I've helped that it's really done great for. So this is what it's all about. So this is Craig Hain, Dr. Dell. You can see I'm excited. And I'm excited for you. I'm excited for the future. I'm excited for our youth. That's what I'm most excited about. I think I'm going to live a lot longer. I'm optimistic and all that. And I'm healthy and I feel good. And I'm very energetic and all that. And that's not bad for somebody that soon going to have their 84th birthday coming up soon. I will see you on other videos if you take my program. And if you're a student, and particularly then if you're a STEM student, we're going to see a lot of each other. And you're going to really love what I'm teaching. By the way, it's not because I'm a great teacher. I'm just picking the content that's the right content. Somebody else will come along probably and have a much better math program than I do. They'll do a much better job, and that's fine and dandy, but at least I've led the way. And, somebody might make an automobile better than the Tesla automobile, and that probably will happen, but he led the way. And I considered what I'm doing for mathematics what Elon Musk is doing for the electric car industry, just to use an analogy and an example. I think this is a fair analogy because he's using the latest technologies for Tesla, and I'm using the latest technologies for our math training, and that's what it's all about. So, Craig Hain, thank you very much for watching, and I hope to see you on lots of videos if you are a math student. Have a wonderful life. Bye-bye.